Hello there and welcome. I'm Cassidy Cash, and this is That Shakespeare Life. In Shakespeare's lifetime, England was part of a broad phenomenon known as the Little Ice Age. We're going to explore that history today and look at what's called proxy evidence, and that's the items that you would use to learn more about the weather phenomenon going on in Shakespeare's lifetime. That's what's happening right now on That Shakespeare Life. In Shakespeare's lifetime, England was part of a broad phenomenon known as the Little Ice Age. To explore this part of history and understand what kind of wild weather was happening in Shakespeare's lifetime, historians rely on textual evidence from the period, including references in plays like Shakespeare's plays. But another surprising place to look for what's known as proxy evidence for climate events in history is through artwork. That's right, through paintings. For a podcast episode on Shakespeare's wild weather and the Little Ice Age of the 16th and 17th century as it was happening in England, I sat down to talk with Laurie Johnson from the University of Queensland to ask him about what sorts of proxy evidence he was able to use in his research looking into the Little Ice Age of this period. Here's what he had to say.
Absolutely. We just need to be very careful that we don't reduce the work of the playwright, any playwright, let alone Shakespeare of all people, to that of a recorder of events. Sure. So it is something that happens when we're looking for proxy evidence. A lot of the work we do as historians or theatre historians is to look for cultural evidence, artistic creations. So one of the most popular ones when it comes to the Dutch art of the era is to look at their paintings of the skaters on the ices of the rivers and so on, or in some cases to even identify townships where a glacier will be added to the landscape in the background, and we get a sense that, okay, we know that's there. They're not making that up. It's not part of their mindset as a landscape painter at that time to fictionalize what they're painting. They're genuinely painting from observation. But at the same time, though, we need to be mindful when we do art history around that we're paying attention to the artistic interpretation of what they see through their techniques, their color palette, and so on. But at the end of the day, if there's a glacier in the painting, there was a glacier there in the real world. The theatre, of course, is not landscape art, but it still has a certain relationship to the reality of the time. We talk about topicality, reading Shakespeare's plays in relation to some of the events of the time. And if there was a confluence of weather patterns that might lead to concerns around famine, etc., then we might be looking for evidence of that in the real world as well.
If you'd like to learn more about the history of the Little Ice Age in England, including letters from sailors who were writing that their boats had been frozen over, along with other information on the Thames River freezing over, and even one year that happened during the Little Ice Age when the Thames River completely dried up entirely. That's right, dried up, not froze. That's an interesting story. If you want to hear these stories, you can listen to our entire podcast episode with Laurie on CassidyCash.com. It's at CassidyCash.com/episode 368. While you're there, be sure to check out the detailed show notes for patrons, where you can see paintings from the 16th century that feature some of this wild weather phenomenon, including glaciers and even a couple of paintings that show tornadoes for this time period. With all of this wild weather going on, it's tempting to wonder if Shakespeare had a way of predicting the weather. Was there such a thing as a weatherman for the 16th century, someone to tell you what was going to be happening? Find out in this episode on your screen right now. Yes, that one right there. Go ahead, click away, and learn more about the history of weather.